The wind howling through the Appalachian Hills on December 24, 1945, carried more than just the chill of winter. It carried the scent of a mystery that would outlive everyone involved. In the small town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, George Sodder, a tough, self-made Italian immigrant who ran a successful trucking business, was settling in for a quiet Christmas. He and his wife Jennie were the proud parents of 10 children. One son, Joe, was away serving in the army, but the rest of the house was bursting with the chaotic joy of the holidays. The tension actually began months before the fire. George was a man of strong opinions, particularly regarding his disdain for the Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. This didn't sit well with the local Italian immigrant community. In October, a traveling insurance salesman tried to sell George a policy. When George declined, the salesman's face twisted with rage. "Your house is going up in smoke," the man hissed, "and your children are going to be destroyed. You are going to be paid for the dirty remarks you have been making about Mussolini." Around the same time, another stranger showed up under the guise of looking for work. He pointed to the fuse boxes at the side of the house and remarked, "This is going to cause a fire someday." George, confused, had just had the wiring inspected by the power company, who declared it perfectly safe. The children, too, felt watched. The older boys noticed a man in a dark car parked on the main road, his eyes fixed on the younger kids as they walked home from school.
The clock struck midnight, ushering in Christmas Day. Most of the family was asleep. Jennie was startled awake at 12:30 a.m. by the telephone. When she answered, she heard a woman's voice she didn't recognize, asking for a man she'd never heard of. Behind the woman, there was the sound of a party, clinking glasses and high-pitched, hysterical laughter. "You have the wrong number," Jennie said firmly. As she walked back to her bedroom, she noticed the house was unnervingly quiet. The lights were still on. The downstairs curtains were open. The front door was not only unlocked but unbolted. She saw her daughter Marion asleep on the sofa and assumed the other children were upstairs in bed. She went back to sleep. At 1 a.m., a sharp crack sounded on the roof. Something heavy hit the shingles, then it rolled off. Jennie listened for a moment, but silence reclaimed the house. At 1:30 a.m., the silence was broken for good. Smoke began to curl under the bedroom door. "Fire!" Jennie screamed, waking George. They grabbed the baby, Sylvia, and shouted for the children. In the panicked haze of smoke and heat, the family scrambled out of the house. Marion, John, and George Jr. made it out into the snow. George looked up. The stairs to the attic, where Maurice, 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jennie, 8, and Betty, 5, were sleeping, were already a wall of flame. "The ladder!" George roared. He ran to the side of the house where his sturdy reach ladder was always kept. It was gone. It was later found in a ditch 75 feet away, as if someone had intentionally discarded it. Thinking fast, George ran to his 2 coal trucks. If he could start them, he could drive them under the attic window and use the height of the cabs to climb up. He hopped into the first truck and turned the key. Nothing. The second truck? It refused to turn over. Both engines, which had been in perfect working order the day before, were dead. The family watched in agony. They could see the attic windows glowing orange. They screamed the children's names, but no cries came from above. The neighbor tried to call the fire department, but the operator didn't answer. Another neighbor had to drive into town to find Fire Chief F.J. Morris. Despite the station being only a few miles away, the fire trucks didn't arrive until 8 a.m. By then, the Sodder home was a smoldering rectangular scar in the snow. The fire had burned with a strange, fierce intensity, leveling the 2-story structure in less than 45 minutes. Chief Morris did a brief walkthrough of the ashes and told the parents the children were dead. But when George and Jennie asked for the remains, the chief had nothing to show them. No bones, no teeth, not even the charred metal frames of the children's beds. A few days later, George couldn't take it anymore.
He covered the site with 5 feet of dirt, intending to turn the location into a memorial garden. But as the shock wore off, the anomalies began to haunt them. The phone line. A repairman told George that the line hadn't been burned through, it had been neatly severed with a tool. The pineapple. Months later, Sylvia found a hard, green rubber object in the yard, an incendiary pineapple grenade of the type used in warfare. The sightings. A woman at a tourist stop between Fayetteville and Charleston claimed she served the 5 children breakfast the morning after the fire. She said they were in a car with Florida license plates, accompanied by adults speaking Italian. The beef liver. Years later, a rumor surfaced that Chief Morris had found a human heart in the ashes. When investigators dug it up, it turned out to be a fresh beef liver that had never been near a fire. Morris eventually confessed he had planted it there to satisfy the family and get them to stop asking questions.
The Sodders spent their life savings on private investigators. They traveled the country following leads that led to dead ends. Then, in 1968, a letter arrived with a Kentucky postmark. Inside was a photo of a handsome young man in his mid-20s. He had the distinct Sodder brow and the same dark, wavy hair as Lewis. On the back was written, "Lewis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, ill boys, A90132, or possibly 135. Jennie and George were convinced it was their boy. They updated their famous billboard with the new photo, a haunting image of a son they hadn't seen in 23 years. They sent a detective to Kentucky to find the sender. The detective contacted them once to say he was closing in on the location, and then he disappeared. He was never seen or heard from again.
George died in 1969, his heart broken by the weight of the unknown. Jennie lived another 20 years, wearing black every single day as a sign of mourning. She meticulously tended the garden she had planted over the site of the fire, weeding it until she was too frail to walk. When the billboard finally came down in 1989 after Jennie's death, the mystery remained as cold as the West Virginia snow. Were the children taken by a Sicilian kidnapping ring? Were they victims of a political vendetta? Or did they truly perish in the flames, leaving behind nothing but ash and a century of questions? The case remains open to this day, a testament to a family that refused to believe the fire had the last word.